tomorrow when it begins its briefings. But let's turn now to global security experts. CNN national security analyst David Sanger and retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery has served for more than 3 decades. Glad to have both of your minds here with me as we try to unpack really all the different inconsistencies, frankly, but yet this conflict is presently here. David, Rubio said the U.S. had to strike because Israel was going to, and Iran would retaliate against the U.S. Tonight, Iran is seizing on that very thing, and their foreign minister posted this. Mr. Rubio admitted what we all knew. U.S. has entered a war of choice on behalf of Israel. There was never any so-called Iranian threat. So is there a clear why to that, and what's the risk of this having been expressed?
Well, first, while no one's going to miss the supreme leader who did huge damage across the Middle East, was the source of huge amounts of terror and instability, and ran Iran either as president or as supreme leader since 1981. But that said, this was a war of choice because back in June, the president was pretty effective in at least burying, if not obliterating, that stockpile of nuclear fuel that could have been turned into a bomb. So what you heard Steve Witkoff say would have been true in June, but isn't true today because of the earlier action that they took. All of this churn we've been hearing, I think, sounds to me like they're trying to develop a rationale for an imminent threat because just doing a preventive war, they're weak, we're strong, is considered illegal under the UN Charter, most international law. So they're struggling to get there. The problem with Secretary Rubio's statement is he wasn't arguing there was an imminent threat of attack from Iran. He was arguing that he had to put the interests of the Israelis first, and he couldn't contain them if they were going to attack, and then the effects of that would redound on the United States.
Well, that's what's between the lines, right, of his statement of essentially the U.S. would be harmed, would become Iran's target if Israel did attack. And so there was that sort of chain, causal connection there. But is that a reasonable assumption to make, and that how the U.S. military would normally operate?
Well, we would want to take if we knew someone was going to attack us, we'd prefer to be preemptive. You have less of your forces exposed. You can knock down more of the enemy. I will say, though, that
there's an intermediary. That's the issue.
Yeah, and with Israel involved, I mean, clearly, this is a well-integrated strike campaign. It kind of it puts the lie to that story because clearly our planners and their planners worked very carefully. You don't do this kind of suppression of enemy air defense randomly. So we had worked a plan ahead of time. Whether the timing was being pushed by Israel, that could be true, but the permissions to do this and the overall leadership desire to do it was clear.
So if that's true, and there was this coordination that obviously took some level of planning, what does that say in terms of the ability of the United States to convince Israel otherwise? If they were the intermediary that would be attacked, that would trigger our own attack, does that suggest the United States doesn't have control over Israel in some way that was meaningful? Well,
at other times in recent history, the president has had pretty good control over Israel's actions.
Well, obviously not now.
Not now. During the Gaza ceasefire, the president basically forced the prime minister to agree to the American peace plan. But in this case, they were so integrated, as Mark indicated, that it was the CIA that determined that the supreme leader and his council of national security aides were going to be on at 9:30 in the morning at the supreme leader's compound, and the Israelis struck it. So that's how deep in they were with each other. The U.S. can say it didn't pull the trigger, but it certainly provided the intelligence that allowed that trigger to be pulled. So it's not as if they were concerned simply that Israel was going to drag them into the war. They were planning this together, as Mark suggested.
Speaking of the integration level of this, I mean, they're saying, the administration is saying that their goal is to remove the threat of Iran's short-term ballistic missiles and to destroy their Navy. Their timeline seems to be 4 to 5 weeks. One, is that reasonable? And can that be done without United States boots on the ground?
No, for this kind of attack plan, I think it is the facilities, the equipment, and the actual production of ballistic missiles and drones, and the destruction of not just the naval ships, as the president said, but their mining capability and their anti-ship cruise missile capability, so they can't threaten the straits. That is probably a 3-week plan, and then you assess how you did. You do battle damage assessment, and then you selectively reattack for a 4th or 5th week. To me, that's the right level. I mean, my concern is the president will prematurely start this, get it really going, and then pull the hook, early.
Before that 4 to 5 weeks.
Before that 4 to 5 weeks. That's what happened with the 12-day war. I mean, that 12-day war should have gone on another 8 to 12 days. But after he did the Fordo, he pulled it. In fact, Israeli planes were in the air for more strikes and had to be called back. So, yes, it is a 4-week air campaign, and at a minimum in my mind, and we need to actually do it at this point.
With boots on the ground?
No, the only boots on the ground would be the kind of Title 50 intelligence community special operators that help with really selective targets. And I assume that's already happened. It certainly happened from the Mossad, from the Israeli point of view, in my mind. So maybe from ours, but not the traditional boots on the ground of Army and Marine Corps units you associate with that.
I do want to quickly say Netanyahu was responding tonight to allegations that he dragged the President of the United States into this with his thoughts. Listen to what he said.
Iran is committed to your destruction. And whether people understand it or not, the leader has to understand it. Donald Trump understands it. You don't have to drag him into anything. And nobody would do it anyway. He does what he thinks is right. And this is right.
What do you see at the dynamics between Netanyahu and Trump now?
Well, they're pretty joined at the hip on this one at this point. The president has not really explained terribly well what his ultimate goal here is. And that's maybe where the split with Netanyahu becomes clear further out. It's, as Mark suggested, when it's time to end this. Now, this is part of the problem with the president having so many different goals, and you tick them off at the beginning. But he made it pretty clear in that video that he released on the Saturday morning, just when the fighting began, that he wanted the Iranian people to stay in their homes till this was over and then come out and rise up and overthrow their government. That's the definition of regime change. But how is he going to engineer that? If the if the Islamic Revolutionary Guard comes out and fires on those protesters, is it the U.S. that will come in on the ground to help them?
David Sanger, Admiral Mark Montgomery, thank you both. One of many big questions tonight.